listening to the Jersey Guys Podcast, the show that talks about hard rock, heavy metal, AOR, and West Coast music. In-depth conversation and special guests are always on tap, so settle in and turn it up. Now, here are your hosts, Tom and Mark.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Jersey Guys Podcast. I'm Mark Ballo and here with my co-host Tom Coyne. And as you see sitting in between us, we've got the return of TJ.
What's up, guys?
Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it's always fun when you're here. We get the three opinions of ours, so it's pretty cool. Tonight we're actually going to be doing an episode where we are going to talk about Ronnie James Dio, a legendary metal singer. We all know him. And we're going to talk about his top 20 songs of his career. Everything he's done, Rainbow, Black Sabbath, solo, anything else we want to throw in there. Tom, what was your thought? Because you had talked about doing this a couple months ago.
Well, I actually copied this idea from the great Eddie Trunk, who I know had a whole big episode on his Sirius XM station about this, and my girlfriend was telling me about it, listening to it every day, and it was actually got to the point that there were named musicians that were calling in with their list. And when I thought about it, I said it's a very novel idea of the king of heavy metal singers, hard rock singers, however you want to categorize it, and to come up with a top 20 is actually pretty difficult. So I ran it by Mark and TJ a number of months ago, try to get schedules coordinated, and we finally got to a point where we're going to do it. And hopefully it has a little bit of the character that Eddie Trunk show had, and maybe more.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe more.
Maybe more. Well, I mean, everybody knows Dio, obviously. I mean, like you mentioned, one of the legendary metal singers, of course. A guy that started back in, was it the 50s? He started recording stuff, but doing stuff vastly different from metal, obviously. But yeah, I mean, he came on board with Elf in the 70s, right?
That's how he got discovered by Richie Blackmore. They were opening for Deep Purple, that last incarnation with Ian Gillan, of Deep Purple.
Yeah, and then he went on to form Rainbow, obviously with Blackmore. Did 3 albums with
three
studio
albums, 3 studio albums, a couple of different different eras of live albums, live in Europe, but 3 studio albums, yes.
Yeah, and then he went on, of course, to Black Sabbath, two albums there in the early 1980s, pretty legendary stuff. Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, of course, and then he went on to a solo career, 10 albums of solo material. So there's a lot of stuff to talk about. And
he's the only artist, I've always said this, he's the only artist that has been in 3 Hall of Fame hard rock heavy metal band. There's no other artist that could say that. Yeah. He's been in 3 bands that were in the upper echelon of everything else. And that puts him in a category that doesn't compare with anybody else, in my opinion.
Yeah, and then this year would have been Ronnie's 80th birthday. Passed away in 2010, May 2010. So this year, would have been his 80th birthday.
Actually, I think maybe 81.
81. Yeah,
he was born in 42. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So good time to talk about this. Focus on him.
Yeah.
But what I've done, we've done it in the past, and I know we're gonna change it around a little bit. I've gone first when we've done these lists or discography discussions before. So we're gonna let Tom, whenever we start, we're gonna let you go with yours first, right?
Yeah, we'll all talk a little bit about Dio, and then we'll divulge our lists, and hopefully it's moderately interesting to everybody.
well, TJ, we know you're a big Dio fan. Obviously, you did an episode with us. We did the Dio versus Ozzy Sabbath era, right?
Yeah.
So how did you kind of get into to Dio? And I know he's your favorite singer, probably, right?
Yes. Yeah. For me, he's number one for me. When I was introduced to hard rock, heavy metal, Dio was like the first guy that I really was introduced to. And I think I spoke about it briefly, being introduced to the Holy Diver album was like the first exposure I had to this genre. So it means a lot to me going over this list and talking about Dio and his career and 20 songs to me that I feel like are the most impactful to me.
Yeah.
So I'm also a type of guy that's going to say I prefer the Dio era of Black Sabbath over the Ozzy.
Okay.
Slightly, but that's how I feel.
Well, that's fair. Yeah.
And not to disrespect Ozzy, but I love the Dio era, even though it was only 2 albums, really 3, but the 2 from the 80s.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for this. I'm really pumped to see what you guys have, and let you know what I have as well.
Cool. So Tom, you saw Dio when with Rainbow?
No, I wish I could say I did. I did not. I think Phil did see them.
Oh, okay.
Friend of ours. I
Phil
saw
Di Benedetto, by the way.
Phil Di
We had him
Benedetto,
as our very first
doesn't
guest.
watch our podcast, but I always tell him about them. I saw Dio at the Nassau Coliseum with Sabbath in '80, and
So it was Heaven and Hell.
Heaven and Hell.
Wow.
Right.
It's a good one to start with.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I saw him on the Last in Line tour, and then I saw him. We were talking about this before we went on the air, on the Lock Up the Wolves tour, which was at the Ritz, I believe.
Yes, with Yngwie.
It was a triple bill of Cold Sweat,
Mhm.
Yngwie, and Dio.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't actually. I think the first time I actually ever saw Dio was 1994. We were talking about this a little bit ago. It was on the the Strange Highways.
Strange
tour?
Highways, that would have been, yeah.
94 at the Birch Hill, which is just a stone throw from where we're recording tonight. So it's not there anymore, but legendary place. So yeah,
We are recording in the bowels of Freehold, New Jersey, in an underground bunker.
Yes.
right. That's right.
Classified location.
So, but do you want to do the list? You got other stuff you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I'll expound a little bit on what the list is from. And to me, as a fan, it was based on pretty much the 3 Rainbow albums, although only 2 of the 3 albums do I have songs on there from. The first 2 Black Sabbath albums and the first 3 Dio albums, and with one little song that's a bit of a wrinkle. So to me, that is the real meat and potatoes of Dio. I know there are some people that are Dehumanizer fans. I know that people that are big Heaven and Hell fans, which I don't dislike. I do like that album a lot, but I really think if you're going to focus on the greatness, it's the Rainbow, the 3 Rainbow albums, the first 2 Sabbath albums, the first 3 Dio albums, total of 8 albums.
Yeah. Well, like TJ, when we were talking, we kind of shared our list with each other before we started tonight. I said, me personally, and I can't say I was the biggest, Dio fan. I mean, I respect what he was as a vocalist and the bands he was in, but I mean, growing up, I just wasn't into like the Sabbaths and the early Rainbows. It was a little bit before my time, and just because of my age. But I as I go back, obviously I listened to the Rainbow material that Dio was on and everything. But we talking about like, and I said on my list, I think it's based on probably like almost like a greatest hits of what Dio would be.
Right.
Not too much, that's deep track type stuff.
Right.
How do you measure up? Do you have like some deep tracks in your list?
I do towards the end of my list. I mean, if you take the 20 that I have, the first 10 to like 14 are like kind of greatest hits, stuff that are going to be stuff that everybody will probably have on their list.
Yeah.
And then everything after that, like kind of from 14 to 20 is like some deep tracks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Tom, you did the same thing?
Yeah, I did the same thing. I just wanted to say also that in my opinion, Dio, as great as he was, he did have the benefit of working with Richie Blackmore, Tony Iommi, and a very young Vivian Campbell.
Good point.
Who was, in my opinion, still, I mean, I'm always the first one to say, I'll always side with Vivian Campbell with all these arguments about, Dio and Vivian Campbell, because the proof is in the pudding. When he left the band, they were never the same, my opinion. So he was a great artist. He had a phenomenal voice, but he did have the benefit of working with some great guitar, not only guitar players, but writers and guys that came up with great riffs and ideas. And so my list really centers around a lot of Vivian Campbell, Tony Iommi, and obviously Richie Blackmore, who's, in my opinion, the greatest, all around greatest guitar player, musician of all of hard rock and heavy metal. I think he's, if you had to pick one, if you had to pick a Babe Ruth of this music, to me, it's Richie Blackmore. So he started off in this music with Richie Blackmore. He segued to Tony Iommi and ended up with Vivian Campbell. So
yeah, that's interesting.
My list is very heavy on the influx of those three guys.
Yeah. It's an all-star team for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
interesting.
Who's going to start here?
I want you to start.
You want me to start? All right.
We've done these.
All right. I got to take my glasses off now so I could read. I don't have to look at the screen.
We've done these discography discussions in the past, and I think I've always started for whatever reason, just because I do the intro. But we'll change it up tonight. We'll let you start.
I'm going to start from.
We're going to go 20 to 1, so we can build up the excitement for everybody.
Right. All right.
Anticipation. I know you don't like that, but we got to do it.
Change it up.
All right. Okay. Number 20, King of Rock and Roll. Lead off track on Sacred Heart. Absolutely love it. Number 19, Long Live Rock and Roll. Number 18, Hide in a Rainbow, which was a song I was playing for Mark and TJ before we went on the air, was a soundtrack song that actually didn't appear on any Dio album. It was on the Iron Eagle soundtrack. Absolutely love it. With a great synthesizers in it and a great hook. To me, it was a song that could fit in any one of the first 3 Dio albums.
Interesting. I like that.
Yeah. 17, Voodoo from TJ's big favorite album. Next, 16, Straight Through the Heart, which I thought, it's just got such a great hook.
Yeah.
15 was Light in the Black. Another terrific song that I love. 14, Don't Talk to Strangers. 13, Falling Off the Edge of the World. 12, Neon Nights. 11, Children of the Sea. 10, LA Connection. One of my favorite songs.
That's a good one, and I didn't put that in my list, but that's a good one.
9, one of the heaviest, most intense songs ever recorded, Sign of the Southern Cross. Number 8, Rainbow in the Dark. We know what that song all means to the Dio fans.
It's true.
Number 7, Over and Over, song that from Marble Roofs that I love. Number 6, Heaven and Hell. Number 5, Kill the King. Number 4, Die Young. Number 3, Sacred Heart. Number 2, Gates of Babylon. Number 1, Stargazer.
Wow.
That's my list.
Wow. And he threw the paper and
it's like the mic drop.
Yeah.
That's my list, and I'm sticking to it.
I like that. That was good. And I mean, it shows, because obviously you said you go way back as a fan. You're what, 64? 63? 64?
163.
No, but it's that's why I asked you earlier. Did you get to see Rainbow?
I didn't.
But I mean, you were a guy that went to see Led Zeppelin at the Garden in the 70s. You saw Black Sabbath early on. You saw, you saw it all. So you got to see some really classic, epic type, concerts. So it's interesting because I think you're a good point of reference for it.
It's important to think too, because you have a different perspective from me and also from Mark. We all have different ways of looking at all the different eras, so totally. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Good list.
Yeah. So do you want to go, TJ?
Sure.
You want to do
take
yours?
It from here.
Okay.
So number 20 for me is going to be LA Connection. Number 19 is Tarot Woman. That's from Rising. 18 is Mystery from Last in Line. 17 is Rock and Roll Children from Sacred Heart. 16, Sacred Heart. I know it's a little high on my list, but I love this. I love that song, but I know other people go crazy.
Rock and
for
Roll
it.
Children's a good
Rock
choice.
and Roll Children.
Yeah, I was tossing that
That's
around
like a sneaky
too.
song.
I love
that
that song
snuck
too.
in there for me.
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah. 15 is Starstruck, which interestingly enough, I read the book that you bought me for the Ronnie James Dio book.
Mm-hmm.
And in there he talks about how that song was based off of some like woman that was stalking
Yes,
the band. That would
I've read
follow
that
them
too.
to
Yeah.
every show and would just stalk them. And they made a song out of it, kind of like messing around with it. So 14, Children of the Sea, from Heaven and Hell. 13, Man on the Silver Mountain. So I'm going old school there.
Yeah, classic.
12, Kill the King. 11, Sign of the Southern Cross. 10 is going to be Falling Off the Edge of the World. 9, Long Live Rock and Roll. 8 is Last in Line. 7 is Country Girl. That's from Rock Rules.
Yeah,
That's another one that
another
was,
one.
yeah, that's a great song.
Yeah.
Great song.
6, Die Young. 5, Rainbow in the Dark. 4 is Heaven and Hell. 3 is Neon Nights. 2 is Holy Diver. And number 1 for me, Stargazer.
Interesting. Okay.
So for me, again, there's a lot of Sabbath stuff in here,
Mm-hmm.
especially Heaven and Hell. I really honed in on, and then everything from like 14 to 20, like I said, is kind of some deep tracks I threw in there, and then pretty much everything from 1 to 10 is like the Hall of Fame stuff when it comes to Dio, like everything that everyone probably will have on their list some way or another,
Yeah.
So no, number 1, I mean, Stargazer. I mean, every time I listen to it, I'm like mesmerized by that song. It's just 8 minutes of
It's in my opinion,
perfection.
the greatest hard rock song of all time. And if you listen to everything in that song, as a fan of music from the 80s, there were so many bands that built off of that. And even bands from like Thin Lizzy in the late 70s to mid 80s when they broke up. Blue Murder, really, White Snake, they all use that format of that song with that Arabian type of scales and that Indian type of vibe. And that was stuff that Ritchie Blackmore was doing. I mean, George Harrison did it with the Beatles in the 60s. That was really the introduction of that in rock music, but nobody had ever done it playing guitar like that. Yeah. And that was really the introduction of, if you listen to, they're all Arabic scales in that solo. And that had never been done in hard rock music before. And there were so many bands that copy. And I even to a degree, I think Led Zeppelin really borrowed liberally from that too. It's in my opinion, it's the greatest hard rock song of all time, if I had to pick one.
Wow.
Definitely game-changing stuff.
Yes.
Sure.
What about a song like Country Girl? You said that, kind of like you said your 1 through 10 was your sort of the Hall of Fame, but like what about Tom? What your feelings on a song like that?
I love that song, and I don't think it made my list. Yeah. Right? I don't think it did.
Yeah, it's not on mine.
Yeah, you know what? When I was doing this, I was trying to diversify it a little bit. I didn't want to go too top heavy on certain albums, and Mob Rules is an album that I've had this discussion with TJ many times. In my opinion, I think cover to cover, it's a little bit better than its predecessor, and much people think that album is untouchable. It's just a great album. I didn't want to pick too many songs off that album, but I could have pulled a lot of songs off of that and put Country Girl in that.
Yeah. How come Man on the Silver Mountain didn't make it for you?
I'm not a huge fan of that first Rainbow album. When you go back and you listen to the 2 albums after it, it was like Rainbow at its infancy. When the album came out, I liked it. And then when you saw Rising and Long Live Rock and Roll,
overshadowed.
It kind of paled in comparison, I thought. It was, you could see it had great cover. I love the artwork on the cover. And I remember buying that album and just, you kind of knew Ritchie Blackmore was going off into another dimension. You heard the Dio vocals, you saw that artwork. You heard Green Sleeves on there, and you kind of knew that there was like great stuff coming. But I didn't think that was a great album. I thought that was a good album for what it was. A guy that broke from Deep Purple, which at the time was the pinnacle hard rock band,
Yeah, like probably one
in
of the
the
biggest
world.
bands in the world.
They
Yeah.
were.
Yeah.
They were the biggest hard rock band at the time. I mean, they headlined the California Jam.
Yeah.
So you knew what was coming. But that album to me is good. But the two after it, you know, to this day are just legendary.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. But you want me to just do my list now?
Yeah, no, we're
All right.
chomping at the bit.
Because, well, I think start right off the bat. I'll start with number 20, and I'm gonna get like hate mail or people calling me an asshole or you know, but I my number 20 Dio song is "Children of the Sea," and I mean obviously it's a classic song, Sabbath. You know, but for me when I was doing this list, it ended up being at the bottom because to me it's just as classic as it is. It's a little plotting for me. I don't know if that you know.
Yeah, it's
makes
kind of
sense.
it's kind of got almost the hooks and everything are kind of like almost like early Ozzy type of Sabbath.
Yes,
It's got a lot of bum
That's true.
bum ba
Yeah.
bum ba bum, but like that kind of
Yeah.
like plotting early
Yeah.
Sabbath sound to it.
yeah.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
So for me, I guess it just when I was thinking of Dio's vocals, you know, I don't the song just didn't work that well for me for whatever reason. But that's number 20. Number 19, I'm gonna go with Wishing Well. From the Heaven and Hell.
That's a
album.
deep track from that album. Most
It
people
is.
overlooked, and that's a good song. Most people overlook that song.
Yeah, and I love that
I
song.
know Phil
mean,
likes that song a
As
lot.
I went back and listened to the albums, and when I was making this list up, I was like, that's got to be in there somewhere, you know? And I just love the song. So that's number 19. Number 18, I'm going to go with Last in Line. Number 17 is Rock and Roll Children. Number 16 is Holy Diver. Number 15 is Starstruck. And that's where I kind of like, I had a run on songs that were very super catchy. And
Oh, that song is really catchy. Yeah.
Definition of catchy.
Oh yeah. So it's like that's I you know, and you're gonna see it as I go a couple more into the list here. It's these catchy.
That didn't even make my list. That song.
You know, and that's me though, because I'm a guy that's I know we said I'm like
No,
an
you like
80s
commercial hard rock.
Yeah, I'm an 80s child, so I grew up in that, you know, that arena rock thing. So for me, a good catchy song is like, you know,
Absolutely.
so that's why I got that. So yeah, so Starstruck at number 15. Number 14, I'm gonna go with Sunset Superman. Number 13 is
I wanted to comment on that. I told you, I thought that was a great choice. There were a couple of songs off of that album that I really wanted to put in here, but it was just hard for me to shave. But I'm a big fan of Dream Evil. I thought it was Dio's, even though that was the first album without Vivian Campbell.
Yeah.
I thought that was a terrific album. Not as good as the first three, but a terrific album. And that's a song that I like a lot off that album. There were a couple of them that were great.
I'm glad I built a little credibility, I guess, back from, you know.
Starting
with
your
know,
list is
Children of the
very
Sea
good.
at number 20.
I have no issues with you. I think
Redeeming
you have
yourself,
I think you have a very good list.
We both have Starstruck at 15, actually.
Oh, interesting. Look at that. Okay, so that was Sunset Superman. So then I go to number 13. I'm gonna go to Mystery, and again, you talk about
that's a very
catchy
commercial song too.
commercial. I
Yeah.
love that stuff. You know.
Good deep track.
Yeah, and then number 12 is Turn Up the Night.
That's a great song.
I just love the
it's another song that I
feeling of
could have
song, the
very
energy of
easily
that song. I just love it.
easily put that on my list, and I was like, what do I take out? That's a great song off of Mob Rules.
Yeah, so I had to put that in there. Number 11 is Die Young from Sabbath, of course.
Killer.
Number 10, going with Man on a Silver Mountain.
There we go.
So I'm there with you. Number 9, so now we're going into the top 10 here. Number 9 is We Rock from Dio. Number 8, Hungry for Heaven. Again,
That's a good song
super
too.
catchy song, right?
Very good choice.
Anything, you know,
That's
like
awesome.
Another song that I
If
could
it
have
was
easily.
25, that would be in my
Yeah,
team.
definitely.
If 5
Great
songs,
song.
it'd be-
Great
Okay,
song.
yeah. So I got that.
Off a
in there.
great album.
Yeah. That's number 8. Then number 7 is Kill the King. Again, just a classic. I mean,
Yeah, that was my 5.
yeah. So the Kill the King. Number 6, Long Live Rock and Roll. Just a classic, you know, rainbow song. Number 5, Stargazer. Again, we talked about that epic, just epic track. You know, no other words needed for that. Then number 4, Neon Nights from Black Sabbath. Number 3, Rainbow in the Dark. I love the stabbing keyboards
Yes.
that open that.
Right.
That's just, and I'm a big
And
guy.
if you
that
did you see
loves
the
that.
documentary yet?
I did not.
Yeah,
no.
when you see it, they'll talk about how that came about. Jimmy Bain
It was
came
like
up with that.
accidental.
It was
just-
accidental.
yeah, he was
Yep.
messing around. He's like,
Yep.
wait, that was really good.
Yes.
Really?
Do it again.
Yeah, it's
Interesting.
really very interesting. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Because I'm a guy.
It wasn't
and I
supposed to
love
be in
that.
the song.
Really?
Yeah.
No,
Oh, wow.
It's not.
Because I love that the stabbing
Oh, me too.
keyboards with that.
I mean, I think
pumpiness
that's the
to it.
biggest thing me and you share as
Yes,
fans. We both love
definitely.
that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So that's that. Where was that? It was number 3, right? Rainbow in the Dark. Number 2 is Mob Rules from Sabbath, and number 1, Heaven and Hell. To me, it's just, to me, I can't get anything better than Heaven and Hell for
Respect that.
Again, I'm not a guy that grew up on Sabbath, but that song, another just epic track, great track. So that's.
I think you have a terrific
That's an
list.
awesome
I was very impressed with your list. I think if I had to pick one song that I would say I was totally disagree with on your list would be Mob Rules.
Okay.
I never liked that song.
Really?
Yeah, I never liked that song.
Kind of like me with Children of the Sea.
Right,
It's like
right,
that same
right.
feeling. For whatever
Right.
reason, it just didn't click with you. Yeah.
But for a guy
Our
that's
list
not
is
like
similar.
a Dio Sabbath nut,
Yeah.
I think it was a very good list. I had a couple of
thank
you.
very cool deep tracks in it.
Our lists are very similar.
Yeah.
Mine, yours.
Yeah,
More
yeah.
similar
Yes.
than
Yeah.
you're on your own
Yeah.
island over there a little
Right,
bit.
wow.
Some stuff. We're close with some stuff.
Yeah.
Me and Mark. Yeah.
Well, how about let's talk about this, because I actually have a couple on my list, and we're gonna talk about it. But we talked about this before we started. Do we have like honorable mentions? Anybody want to throw in? You have something, Tom, that you have?
I didn't put it on. The only reason I didn't is because, and I was actually doing that. Once I started with that, it kind of rolled into 2, ran into 5, ran into 10. Like,
Yeah.
how do I put this and not put that? And then I was even telling TJ I just cut it because it was impossible for me to do once I opened that vault of adding extra songs. So I just left it with the 20.
Okay. TJ, did you have honorable mentions?
So I got 2.
Okay.
One is "Hide in the Rainbow," which we mentioned earlier, which I honestly forgot about that song, and then my dad put it on, and I was like, actually, I'm gonna throw it in honorable mention. And the second is "Run with the Wolf"
Ooh.
from Rainbow Rising.
That is
Wow.
a good song.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it was originally in my 20, and I gave it the boot for LA Connection.
Really?
So I was like, I have to mention it. I love the lyrics.
Yes.
Lyrics are so good, and I think it's a great song. So I threw an honorable
That's a
mention.
good. Yeah, those
That's a real
are a
deep one. I
couple
like
of good
that.
honorable mentions.
That's good. Yeah.
And
Well,
I know
yeah.
you got a few tricks up your sleeve.
Well, no, I did a couple honorable mentions too, and like you said, you're trying to narrow it down to 20, and there was a few I had at the bottom that kind of went in and out as I was doing the list and putting you in order. But I have 2, just like TJ, and my 2 honorable mentions are going to be "Lady Evil" from Black Sabbath, a song. I mean, maybe not. It was originally in my list at the bottom, and then it kind of fell out, and I put "Wishing Well" in, and so I went back and forth, but.
The
I don't know.
bass is so good.
That's a great song, and
bass
oddly
is
enough, it's not in my
awesome.
it's not in my list.
Yeah, me
but
neither.
that is a terrific song.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then my other last honorable mention is it's a track, and we didn't talk about this. We did talk about it before we started recording. Dio is not a guy we've had guests, Tom, like Mark Bowles and Rob Rock, and these are vocalists who are great classic metal type vocalists, but these are guys that have been on a million albums, right? They've been on guesting on albums, groups that they've been in over the years, different guitar players, Yngwie and this and that. But Dio's not a guy like that. I mean, Dio was, he's a legend, right? So he wasn't a guy that had to like go and guest on albums and stuff, but he did do a few in his career. And one of my honorable mentions was he sang on Kerry Livgren, did an album called The Mask of the Great Deceiver. Or I'm sorry, Seeds of Change was the album.
That was the name of the album.
But the 1980 it came out. But the song was The Mask of the Great Deceiver. And when I came upon this song, I was going to be an honorable mention. It wouldn't make my top 20, but I just love the Keith Emerson.
Oh, it's a terrific song. Yeah,
synthesizers and that sound, and I was like, to hear Dio's vocals with that type of keyboard, around it wasn't like anything else I think that he ever did. So I had
that's pretty old. That was recorded like in
1980,
right? Yeah. So it was like even before Dio got his own band off the ground.
Yeah.
It was
Sabbath,
right around the beginnings of Black Sabbath that Kerry Living got him to sing. There was 2 songs or 3 songs.
I think he sang on 2. I think 2 or 3.
Yeah, I think it was 2 songs on that album.
Yeah, and he also did Dio was part of that the Roger Glover, right? The Butterfly Bowl thing in
Yes.
the 70s, early
Yeah.
70s.
Yeah, he lent his
Couple
vocals to that too.
couple on that. But yeah, that's I mean, and then we talked about this when we were, before we started recording, but you said talk about the song Stars, right?
Yeah, I was thinking of putting that on my list, which was the All Star. That was 85 or 86.
Yeah, that was when was
The
it?
Benefit
That was,
album
I don't even
song.
know if I have that on here. Yeah,
That
around the 80,
Yeah,
86.
great
something
song
like
that he wrote, but he had Jeff Tate, Dokken, Halford. Uh, yeah,
Well, I think that was based on, I was reading a story, like it was him and Jimmy Bain and Vivian Campbell, right? Kind of like started the
yes,
project.
right.
They
It's in the
went to
documentary also.
something.
They
Did they
talk
talk about
it.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that was interesting. So I mean, that's a classic song, but I mean, what are you saying, like a line or two or whatever?
That's the
and
thing.
everybody
I mean,
took
it
a
was his
line,
song
so-
and everything, but he only sang a couple of lines in it because he literally had like 30 different singers on every guy.
Anybody
I mean,
from-
this was recorded like in 85, 86, the epitome of this stuff.
yeah,
So
I
he
mean-
had, and in the documentary, you could see him yelling at Don Dokken to push him more. And there's the same thing with Halford, too. He was yelling at Halford, you could do better.
Really?
And, like Dio already was at that point where, he was, even for guys that were like Halford before him in terms of, right. But I just felt like his vocal, he only lended a couple of actual lines to it. So to put it in the top 20 was, there's no reason for it. There's so many great songs that Mark and TJ had that I couldn't even put on my list. I wouldn't put something like that, but it was a great song. The song itself is phenomenal.
Oh yeah. And that's the guitar solo.
It's a great song. Yeah. I
But-
think that's what made that whole thing so good. It wasn't like a cheesy put together song.
Yeah.
It was such a good song.
Yeah. No, it's definitely. So yeah, I mean, you had to kind of mention that, if you're talking about Dio, because that was kind of his baby in a way.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, but I mean, yeah. Sadly, I mean, we talked about it earlier. Dio passed away. It's going to be what we said 13 years, right now. So
yeah,
it's crazy to think 13 years. Wow. I remember the day I heard it, the news, and it's one of them things you always remember where you were type of thing, and you just total shock, didn't expect it. He kind of kept things quiet, right, with the stomach cancer. So.
He did, and he, fought valiantly and actually came back. And again, in the documentary, shows him at the Heavy Metal Awards, and he took an award, and he looked better, and everybody thought he was better, and then he had a huge lapse of whatever his issues were, and he died. I think the saddest thing about it is that we as fans know there'll never be another, and like as the years go by, I think there's such a lapse of the next great stars. There's a lot of bands out there, but as guys get older, guys pass away, we look at a guy like Dio, and it's sad, obviously, that he's gone, but it's sad also that they'll never be, at least even in my son's lifetime, I don't think we'll ever see a guy of that magnitude in the hard rock heavy metal vein.
Oh yeah, I mean, you talk about these guys, I mean, whether it's an Ian Gillan or Rob Halford or Bruce Dickinson even.
Right.
But I mean, all these
absolutely.
guys, right? I mean, their time is kind of limited now. We don't know how long these guys are gonna keep going. I mean, Deep Purple just came around and played in Jersey a month or two ago, but you don't know. I mean, they've been on this farewell tour for how long now? And other guys, are just out of the game totally already. So it's a shame, I mean, as metal fans and hard rock fans, it's like we're starting to lose all our
and I
heroes.
would say another guy we could put in that category is Biff Byford from Saxon too, who's still operating on a pretty high level.
Yeah.
And has a tremendous amount of credibility for 4.5 decades, but don't really see the replacements for these guys.
Right.
And it's it's a little unnerving because there are a lot of bands out there, and there are some very good bands out there, but these type of personalities, you don't really see any replacements for them. That's almost as sad as the fact that these guys aren't alive anymore, to me as a fan.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
To me, Dio is someone who, he's so distinctive looking too. He's like, you know,
Oh yeah,
he's
it's a little guy.
little
Right,
guy.
with
Yeah.
You know, the
the-
funny
Right.
thing with Dio back in the day, like when there wasn't like all this media, there were a lot of people that were shocked to see what he looked like. I remember experiencing that with people because unless you saw him, people envisioned something that wasn't him.
Yeah, little guy with this big,
Right.
larger than life voice.
Right.
but
Right,
this-
and that was
Nice.
like a running gag back in the day. Like, do you know what he looks like? You know, like he's this big, and you know, he's like not a very intimidating looking
Right.
guy. Because when you listen to the voice,
vocally, right?
right, you
Voice,
thought like
yeah.
it was like some like bodybuilder guy
Yeah.
or something. You know, like a Kane Roberts or somebody.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and that was that kind of like made him even bigger than what he was because he had this little diminutive.
He's in a
You know, it
band,
was like-
everybody's
he was like an
so
elf.
much bigger than
Right.
him.
Right, that's why the
Yeah.
band was called Elf because
Yeah.
that's what he was. He
Yeah.
was like a little elf with
Right.
this incredible voice
Yeah,
and
changed,
persona. He
you
had
know,
such
the cover of the album,
Right.
Little pointy ears.
he
and
had
stuff.
such
Yeah.
great stage presence and you know iconic moves on the stage and you
Also
know
a great person off the stage too. We saw in the documentary
Yes.
some of the things he did
Yes.
on and off the
Oh, yeah.
stage,
Yeah.
giving back to the community.
I mean almost to the point of being psychotic with his fans. Like he
Oh,
would
yeah.
never,
Totally, yeah.
you know,
Never
like
gave up on the fans.
I got news for you. If he was still alive, we'd have him on this
Yeah,
podcast. He'd
probably,
come on.
right? Yeah, he probably
come-
would. Yeah,
He would
No,
come
he
on
was
and
a
probably
guy, right.
talk to us for 2 hours.
I mean, there's been stories about him, how you know, on hanging out at the tour bus for hours,
Right.
signing autographs,
Right.
and
Yeah.
stuff for fans. He was that type of
Yeah.
guy. You know,
Yeah.
he wouldn't leave you. You know, if someone wanted to
Yeah.
meet him or whatever, get a picture, an autograph, he would do it.
Yeah.
My biggest issue with Ronnie, if I ever had anything to do, is I think he should have brought Vivian Campbell in, you know, whatever the financial cut, because in retrospect, he was never the same without Vivian Campbell. So
Yeah.
when all this arguing and, you know, stuff you see in the documentary, you know, it was Ronnie's band and everything. He did have a real special guitar player.
Yeah.
And, you know, whatever went on behind the scenes, whoever side you want to pick, all I know is he was never the same after Vivian Campbell left. So
Yeah. No, that's
Beginning of the end for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
it really was.
Yeah, it was.
He
No,
milked
it's a
he milked
shame,
out
man.
one good album right after he left. And I'm guessing some of that was, you know, that stuff may have been written before or after, but if you look from Dream Evil going forward, there was really not all that much there going forward. And
Well, he had you mentioned he had Craig Goldie, right? Was right after Vivian,
Yeah.
right? For
and
one album.
Goldie only got that gig because they knew him he was in the early incarnation of Rough Cut,
Oh, okay.
who was under
His wife's
Wendy's
management.
label. Yeah. That's how they got Craig Goldie, because Greg
Okay.
Goldie was not a good fit for that band.
okay.
He's a guy that I actually like. I mean, we know him from Jafria
Yeah.
and other projects, but he's a totally different guitar player than Vivian Campbell was. He didn't have the fire. He didn't have the stage presence,
Mm.
and it was a tough gig for him to fill.
Yeah.
But they did milk out a good album with Dream Evil with Craig,
Yeah.
and nothing against him. I happen to like him, but it was a real tough thing for him to fill.
Yeah.
And he really should have cut Vivian in my opinion, for whatever it's worth,
Yeah.
because it was after he was gone, it was really
Yeah. Well, what do you I mean, you saw him, you said with
I saw him in '89
and that-
the last time. That was with Rowan Robertson.
Rowan Robertson, the young kid he had.
Yes, who was I think like
17,
18 years
17,
old at the
18
time. That was like a big
Yeah.
weird thing at the time that he discovered this
Wow.
feat, because that was the next thing. Like the Craig Goldie did the tour, did that big tour with them, and then it was Dio discovered this phenom guitar
Mhm.
player who actually wasn't all that good compared to the guys that were around at that time.
Yeah.
That was the first thing. A lot of people were kind of disappointed in his guitar playing. Not that he was bad, but you know, there were a lot of guys better at that time. And the album was, you've heard that album, right?
Oh,
Lock
yeah.
Up the Wolves.
Oh, Lock Up the Wolves.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's got its moments, but you know, he blew up the lineup.
Yeah.
You know, Bane was gone,
Right.
Vinny Appice was gone, Claude Schnell was gone.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, I saw them, and it was kind of over almost.
Mm.
I just
Title
got the
track
feeling
was
like it
good.
was over.
Title track was good.
Yeah.
Lock Up the Wolves.
Yeah. And then he went on to he had we talked about this earlier, Tracy G, as a guitar player for a little while there and a few albums, and those we didn't, I don't think any of us
He
really.
he couldn't find magic again, and again, this goes back to the Vivian Campbell. He cut through a lot of guitar plays. He had Doug Aldrich
Right, yeah.
for a while, who's great. I love Doug.
Yeah.
He's been in a million great things, obviously. But he was kind of a
Oh
hired
yeah,
gun. He was
totally at that
playing,
point. Yeah.
yeah, he was playing all the classic stuff of Dio. He never really recorded anything with Dio that was
Right.
memorable. And yeah, he was just kind of chasing his own ghost of trying to find the magic of that band. And that band was magic, man. Put out 3 of the greatest albums of all time, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
And then he, of course, he went on got back with after being in Sabbath, and then he went back to then created the Heaven and Hell thing with Iommi and
Right.
Geezer, right? And that was shortly before he passed, a few years before.
Yeah, it was. In fact, he was, again, in the documentary, they talk about he hadn't spoken about his illness, but they already knew that there was something off with him. And I like that stuff. I don't think it's great. Over the course of listening to it over the years, I up it a little bit more than I did at the time. But that was the tail end of him, before he got really sick and couldn't play anymore.
Right. Yeah. Did you ever listen to any of that later period stuff? TJ?
Very little.
I've been slowly bringing him into it at this point. It's kind of plotting, like Bible Black, was a song that was the song that kind of, stuck. Bible Black kind of had that sound of like Heaven and Hell. A lot of the songs are very plotting.
Yes, definitely.
It was that, I didn't think that album was as great as some people. The tour was really good, but the album I thought was okay. It had a couple of good songs on it. I didn't think the writing was great on it. I don't think they really recaptured the writing magic, but they were pretty damn good live, though.
Yeah,
they really were.
Their age too,
yeah.
And they came out at the gate with a live album first, right?
Yes,
as that, and then did the studio album
right
after that, right?
Right. They were real good live. I mean, Geezer and Tony and Vinny were tremendous, and Dio wasn't 1982 Dio, but he was still damn good for a guy that was in his latest 60s, battling illnesses. He was still really good.
Well, yeah, I mean, here's a guy that never, you talk about nowadays, some of the singers that, they've lost it a little bit, or they, don't sound like they did back then. But I think like Dio always kept high quality, right up till the end. He never really lost it,
Oh, no.
They speak about that in the documentary too.
Yeah.
He never really fell off the trail.
No.
His voice.
And I don't think he was a guy, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think he was a guy who was like a trained type of singer, right? It was just a natural thing for him.
Yes.
It wasn't,
Yeah, in fact, if you read some things that I've read over the years, different bands that opened for Black Sabbath, they said he did very little vocal prep before he went on stage. Yeah. So kind of went on stage like cold.
Yeah. Wow.
I've read that, but bands that talked about when they opened for him on tours, that he did very little vocal prep.
Yeah, so even more so right there. It's like the legend of, that he was, he didn't really have to even,
right.
No practice, nothing, he probably was just like natural.
No, he was a one-off. I'm not really expecting another one of him, but I'd like to see guys that, could maybe the singer in Greta Van Fleet, I know that's maybe a guy but they haven't really elevated to that level yet.
Yeah.
It remains to be seen.
Yeah. So, but I think that was our episode. Hope you guys like this. So we've never done anything like this before. We've done discography discussions, and but we haven't taken an artist and did like a top 20 song thing. I know, like Tom said earlier, Eddie Trunk has done this with various music or bands and artists and stuff over the years on his XM show or on a satellite show. But I mean, this was it was interesting. It was interesting for me to put my list together, and I'm sure both you guys same thing.
Yeah, well, it's coming from 3 different perspectives, which is interesting. Not a lot of redundance in terms of ideology and how you came together with your list. So it's I think it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to like to try and do it again. We threw some other bands. We won't talk about them quite yet, but we threw some other bands out earlier, what we might want to do in the future. And, hopefully if you guys enjoy this one. And again, we always do, we'll post our lists like we always do on our Facebook page and have you guys join in, let us know what you think, give us your top, whatever, 20, top 10, top, whatever, top 5, and discuss it. That's what we like to do. That's why we do these type episodes,
We'd like to hear feedback.
Yeah, definitely. So so that was our episode. I think this would be number 52.
52,
Oh,
yeah.
50s. Look at that.
Yeah,
52.
50s, yeah. So
Rocking and rolling.
getting towards 100,
yeah.
around that other
Big
side of
100.
it.
More good guests coming too.
Right. Yes, we have some stuff in the pipeline. So so that was this episode, and we hope you guys enjoyed it. And we'll see you soon with a new one.
All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Bye.